Hey everybody, Mungo Darkmatter here, and welcome to Solstice, Day 4. Today I want to talk about the theory of the multiverse and time travel. One reason I want to talk about this is a lot of movies have to do with this theory of time travel now, and if you understand it, it's easier to understand the movies and what's going on. So in the past, the theories of time were that if you went back in time, you could actually create a time paradox. So if you went back and you killed your grandfather before your father was born, your father would never be born and you would never be born. So if that happens and you go back to your time, you would not exist. So there's a paradox there. So like in Back to the Future, he had interfered with his father and his mother meeting and getting married, basically, ultimately getting married. And so he starts to fade and disappear at one point because he created a paradox, and the timeline would have changed. He would have never existed. So if you kill your grandfather before your father is born, and your father is never born, then you're never born. So you never were there to get into the time machine to go back and kill your grandfather. If that's the case, then your grandfather never dies, and so this timeline shifts back to what it was before. And so there's a paradox. It's like if you go back and alter certain things in the universe, then the current time can't even exist, and so then you can't go back. I know that sounds confusing, and it is, because you've knocked the order of things around. So if you can go back in time, you can change things so you won't be able to go back into time to change them. So that's the old theory, and that's very confusing, and it's terrible for plots of movies, because you have to make sure you do things when you go back so that your timeline's still the same. The multiverse theory says that there are infinite numbers of universes, just like we're on a planet, in a solar system, in a galaxy, and there are a bunch of galaxies in our universe. It says that there are multiple universes, or infinite numbers of universes with galaxies in them and different planets. But each of those multiple universes, that means there's other versions of this universe which are slightly different. Like you might drive a red car in one version and a blue car in another version of the universe. That might be the only difference. Everything else might be pretty much the same. But if you make that choice to get a different car, that might affect something. You might meet somebody because they like a blue car in the other universe, whereas you wouldn't have talked to them if you had a red car, because the only reason they talked to you and you met them in the first place was because they liked the color of your car and they mentioned something, and then you kind of got to know each other. Just little quirky things like that happen in life. What you can do is look at it is probably some point, or probably many points in your life, where you thought, I wonder what would have happened if I took this job instead of the other job, or I went to this school instead of another school, or if I married this person instead of another person, or if I moved here instead of there. All of those things are going to change your life, the people you're around, and the events that happen in your life. Even if you decide you're going to drive to work a different way one day, it could change the course of your life. You might be a little late to work because you took a different way, or you might have gotten there a little early, and that might have changed just the way the day went. Just a couple minutes can do that. And so the theory of the multiverse says that each time that we make a different decision, a new universe is created, and we're on a new timeline. And so a lot of the movies that have to do with multiverse time theory, that's what's happening. There's multiple timelines, and that's how they explain that things have basically changed, and that's how they enable things to change. Because if you go back and kill your grandfather, and consequently you're never born, to travel back, there's still the timeline that exists where you were born. You're just creating another multiverse where your grandfather was killed. And so the timeline starts from there, and that universe is created at that point and diverges off. So there's basically two copies of you then. And that's what happens in a lot of these plots. There might be a future and a past version of the same character, or two versions of the same character, but they're in parallel universes. All right, so that's basically the theory of the multiverse and time travel in it. That really, when you're time traveling, you're creating an alternate version of the same universe. And that way there are no time paradoxes, because the old universe still exists, where you were able to travel back in time and change something. And even though you might not exist in the next version of that, you still exist in the old version where you went back in time. So there's one of you that's gone back in time and killed your grandfather, so you're not going to be born in the future of that timeline, but you still continue in another version of that. I'm Mungo, Darkmatter, and this has been Darkmatter. And whatever you do, enjoy the day, and try not to shift timelines or anything. I'm more confused after that explanation than I was before I tried to explain it.